Hey everyone, I'm Tim, and I've just finished a 9-month odyssey around Latin America. Now I'm reopening my diaries, and this time I'm bringing you along with me. Week by week, country by country, all the colors, all the craziness, all the food, all the music, and all the splendor. 9 months when each morning was a new adventure. The road was my companion, and Latin America cast its spell on me. This is my Latin America Diaries. Welcome back to my Latin America Diaries, and happy Carnaval from Rio de Janeiro. I'm going to be telling you all about Rio de Janeiro and Carnaval in just a minute, but first of all, a heads up. This is the first vlog in my series that I am telling A, out of order, and B, in reverse. Last time that we left off, we said goodbye from Sao Paulo, but I didn't come straight to Rio de Janeiro from there. Instead, I flew southwest to Foz do Iguaçu to see the Iguaçu Falls, and then continued south through Paraguay and Uruguay to get a little taste of both countries before finally returning to Brazil and arriving here in Rio de Janeiro just in time for Carnaval. So why am I releasing this vlog now? Well, that is because this week, this year, is Carnaval in Rio de Janeiro and all across Brazil. So there is no better time than now to be talking about my experiences there. Next week, I'll be taking you to Iguaçu Falls and Paraguay, and the following week to Uruguay, and that's when the vlogs will catch up to themselves and be back in real time. This vlog is also in reverse because I'll be starting with Rio de Janeiro that really I only got to experience on one of my last days there, because from the moment I arrived, it was straight into Carnaval, and I'll be getting to Carnaval a bit later in this episode. I've noticed in many countries around the world that where there are two major dominant cities in a country, often one takes like one role and another takes another, and they have distinct personalities. So I think of Lahore and Karachi, Delhi and Mumbai. I think of Sydney and Melbourne, New York and Los Angeles, Madrid and Barcelona, Tokyo and Osaka. And often in these cases, what happens is that one city sort of becomes like the internationalized, glamorous picture postcard version of a city for a country. It's sort of its face to the world, and the other city in the country often becomes sort of like a more grittier, grounded, raw, cultural version of an identity, and it's often sort of like two opposing identities. What a lot of people get wrong, in my opinion, about Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo is assuming that they work like this, and that Rio de Janeiro is the sort of international glamorous face of Brazil to the world, and that Sao Paulo is its rougher, more industrial, colder counterpart. And in my experience, it's actually kind of the opposite. If anything, Sao Paulo feels like the slick powerhouse metropolis, the money city, the business city, the media city, the place where scale and polish dominate. In Australian terms, Sao Paulo is more like Sydney, although it's not as geographically blessed as Sydney is. On the other hand, Rio de Janeiro is like Melbourne by the sea. It's more expressive, it's more creative, it's grungy, it's chaotic, it's worn around the edges, but it's absolutely bursting with character and soul. It's not polished seaside glamour that defines Rio de Janeiro for me anymore, although that is the prevailing stereotype. Rio is something different. It's dramatic, messy, musical, spiritual, and celebratory, and wildly alive. Sao Paulo is money and glamour, but Rio de Janeiro is dirty fun. There's no denying it though that Rio de Janeiro is geographically blessed. It is an incredibly beautiful city, and that sort of negates the conversation about if it is the face or the heart of Brazil, because somehow it's sort of the heart of Brazil, but with a beautiful face. The beaches are absolutely stunning, framed by jagged mountains and dramatic curves of coastline. The water was actually pretty cold when I was there, especially compared to Brazil's northeast, where I had been. After checking into the fabulous Aquarela do Leme hostel, I headed directly for the beach. Rio's beaches are really something else. Everywhere you look, there is a postcard view. Sand, sea, mountains, and city all layered together. You've got the famous peaks, Christ the Redeemer watching from inland, high above the city, and Sugarloaf Mountain rising at the end of the Leme and Copacabana stretch, marking the divide between that and Botafogo. These landmarks don't just decorate the skyline, they define it. All across Rio you find incredible views, old churches and cathedrals, and buildings in various stages of weathered romantic decay. Rio isn't polished, but it's purified. On my last day in Rio de Janeiro, I headed up to Christ the Redeemer. Yes, it's touristy, but it's touristy for a reason. From up there, you can really understand Rio's geography. The city wraps itself around the coastline, squeezed between mountains and ocean, with neighborhoods and boulevards pushing outward from the narrow flat land below. Many areas are connected by tunnels carved straight through the rock, while higher up the hillsides sit the favelas or slums that Rio is known for. For me, this was the biggest highlight about being up at Christ the Redeemer. Yes, the statue is pretty impressive, but I mean, I've been to many of these wonders of the world, and the statue itself, and also maybe as someone who's not a Christian, the statue itself didn't do it for me as much as just like the lay of the land below the statue. That was just remarkable. You can reach Christ the Redeemer by tram, which is what I did, or you can hike it, but that is one serious climb. If you're feeling energetic or fit, it might be your thing. After heading back down, I headed to Parque Lage, which is a beautiful park with European-style gardens and a historic palace at its center, now home to a cafe and restaurant. It's extremely Instagram famous. People were lining up not just to eat, but to get the perfect photo. From there, I continued on to Rio's very special botanic gardens, which are lush, sprawling, and full of wildlife, giant lily pads, and towering jackfruit trees. It's peaceful, green, and feels worlds away from the busy beachfront. I finished the day at a mall at Botafogo, which is the perfect place to watch the sun go down while watching clouds drift across Sugarloaf Mountain. It's one of those Rio moments that just stays with you. My accommodation while I was in Rio de Janeiro was at the absolutely fabulous Aquarela do Leme hostel in the neighborhood of Leme, a small district just northeast of Copacabana. It's actually on the same stretch of beach as Copacabana, but it gets past a certain point and the beach changes its name to Leme. It's slightly lower key and quieter than the rest of Copacabana, which is full of a lot of nightlife. It's very tourist heavy, and yeah, Leme is just a bit lower key. It was the perfect balance for me for where I was staying, and I have to say that Aquarela do Leme, the hostel, was hands down the best hostel that I have ever stayed in anywhere in my life. The beds were private, the rooms were quiet, it had air conditioning, each bed had its own fan and a secure safe. It was exceptionally well set up. My room even had a balcony overlooking Leme Beach. There was a co-working space, and the breakfast, incredible. A full buffet breakfast was included every morning, and it was so generous that once I had eaten, I didn't really need food again until the late afternoon. I chose a hostel deliberately, even though Carnaval prices meant that Aquarela do Leme wasn't exactly cheap. I mean, I was paying around 60 something American dollars per night, which is expensive for a hostel, but it was Carnival season, and Carnival is about going out and connecting with people, and I booked it in advance. If you're watching this, do book in advance, because as you can imagine, things in Carnival get booked out very early. And I had booked it intentionally because I knew that I wanted to be connected with other people to know what was going on during Carnival. As it turns out, I had friends in Rio de Janeiro at the time, so that wasn't so necessary, but still, I'm glad that I did book that. There were hostels available that were cheaper, but they had pretty bad reviews, and they weren't that much cheaper. And there were hotels where I would have had a private room, and it wouldn't have cost that much more. But most of them were booked out by the time I got there, and on top of that, I wouldn't have been able to connect with other people staying there as easily as I did at the hostel. And Aquarela do Leme was perfect for that. They had lots of social areas, and they even put together group chats in WhatsApp so that you could sort of go out as a group from the hostel into the Carnival party. Aquarela do Leme is sitting up on a hillside overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, and it's right on the edge of one of Rio's favela communities. Favelas are roughly translated into English as slums, and it's important to speak respectfully and sensitively about this. Favelas are a significant and long-established part of Rio's urban landscape, and many of them are actually like long-standing settled communities. They're not the no-go zones that a lot of outsiders just presume that they are. Like any city, there are areas and there are areas, and favelas are no different. The one right on near Aquarela do Leme in the Leme area is considered one of the more stable and residential favelas, and I can honestly say that I had no problems. I felt completely safe in that area while I was staying there. The only issue, I think, was that there was like a group of motorcycle taxis that were running from up in the favela down to like the sea level where the road turned off to go up there, which meant that a lot of Uber drivers refused to take you up the hill. A lot of Uber drivers would drop you at the bottom because sort of that turn off beyond there belonged to the local motorcycle taxis. But even so, I mean, I was happy to climb the hill, and it wasn't that far. And even so, I think taking a motorcycle taxi after an Uber drive wasn't that expensive anyway, maybe just a couple of dollars. There are organized favela tours available in Rio de Janeiro, and I didn't take one. I have ethical questions about that, and it sort of comes back to, if you saw my vlog about Medellin, it sort of comes back to what we were talking about there with dark tourism. So I mean, that is available if you want to go into a favela to have that experience, but obviously it raises some ethical questions. You know what doesn't raise ethical questions though, and that's liking this video. If you like what you're watching, please like this video, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload new videos from this series. And Carnaval is meant to be shared, so if you like this, please share it across your social media and tell your family and friends about it. It really means so much to me that you guys love what I'm doing here. Ultimately, I had decided to be in Rio de Janeiro during Carnaval at that time of year because of Carnaval. And the last thing I will say about Rio, the city, before moving on to Carnaval, is that I didn't really visit Rio de Janeiro that much. I visited a city in the throes of Carnaval. I need to go back to Rio de Janeiro to experience the city outside of Carnaval, because when you're there during Carnaval, unless you're making an effort to get away from the party scene, you're really not seeing that much of the city. But then in some ways, you're seeing like the city at its quintessential best as well. I'll leave that one with you guys. Let me know in the comments below whether you think that Carnaval is the best time or the worst time to visit Rio de Janeiro. So back to the start of my time in Rio de Janeiro. It was my second night in Rio de Janeiro. I had gone out and bought a couple of shorts and t-shirts to wear to the Carnival parties, and it was time to start celebrating. So I headed out to a square in the central part of the city near a metro station called Gloria, and the party was already winding down by the time I arrived. Still, the atmosphere was joyful. People were dancing, dressed in costumes, music everywhere, that unmistakable Brazilian street energy. That's where I met up with Will once again. We had planned from Salvador and Sao Paulo to eventually meet up in Rio de Janeiro at Carnaval, and so we headed out into the city together. It was fun, genuinely fun, but it still wasn't quite the wild, off-the-leash Carnival energy I'd been expecting. By about 10 p.m, the party started to wind down, and Will and I were sat there like looking at each other like, was that it? That was the moment that we realized that we needed to rethink our Carnival strategy, because we had come to the biggest party in the world that week and we hadn't found the heart of it. Carnival is an event that happens across Brazil, but its most famous iteration is in Rio de Janeiro and followed closely by the one in Salvador. It takes place 7 weeks before Easter, right before the beginning of Lent each year. Carnival is really an amalgamation of various different traditions layered over centuries. Part of it comes from the Catholic calendar, marking the final days before Lent begins, a new spiritual season of reflection and restraint. But Carnival also absorbs indigenous and Afro-Brazilian influences as well, especially in places like Rio de Janeiro and Salvador, where African heritage has deeply shaped music, dance, and ritual expression. There are also echoes of old European harvest and spring festivals, sort of an explosion of joy before a period of austerity. And then there's even the cheeky explanation which states that Carnival takes place just before Lent, which is a period of austerity and hopefully religious behavior. And so Carnival takes place as a kind of orgy of enjoyment in order to rack up all the sins which will then compensate for the period of austerity that follows. So make of that what you will. Over time, all of this has evolved into what is now widely called the biggest party on earth. Every year, about 7 weeks before Easter, prices surge, costumes come out, streets close, music fills entire neighborhoods, and the country shifts into celebration mode. Officially, Carnival runs for 6 days, from Friday through to the following Wednesday, after which begins Lent. In reality, the festivities begin weeks before and continue weeks after, with pre-Carnival Blocos, rehearsals, and post-Carnival street parties, keeping the energy alive far beyond the official dates. A big part of Carnival are what are called Blocos. They're basically block parties, roaming street parties that move through the city and can run anywhere from 4 to 12 hours at a time. They roll through neighborhoods with live music, drums, and crowds following along behind. In Rio de Janeiro alone, there are around 500 registered Blocos on average each Carnival season. And these are just the officially registered and advertised ones. On top of that, there are Blocos on street corners, smaller neighborhoods, that just kind of occur informally and often even spontaneously, hundreds and hundreds of them occurring across the city simultaneously. Sometimes a bloco will sort of split and go in different directions, and you just sort of follow where the party goes. Sometimes one ends and then people just move on over a couple of blocks to the next bloco going on not that far away. Sometimes blocos encounter each other and it becomes sort of synergistic and alchemical. Most blocos have a theme, and I'll share more of that with you as we go through the rest of this vlog. For me, the blocos are really what Carnival is about. It's about people being together, expressing themselves, enjoying, having fun. It's a sort of almost like a city-wide rave that everyone, even families, are somehow involved in. So Will and I arranged to meet in the center of the city the next morning to try and catch some blocos. I took the metro there, and from the moment I stepped out of the hostel into the streets of Leme, you could feel it. There were people around the streets. A lot of them were dressed really like in fancy costumes. Other ones had their shirts off. And, you know, it was this sense that the city was alive. People were in blocos, moving from one to another one. Yeah, you could feel it. And, you know, even on the metro heading towards the center of Rio. A lot of people really dress up for these blocos and for parties during Carnival. But really the spirit of Carnival is not so much dress to impress as it is dress to express yourself. People in Carnival really don't care too much about what you're wearing, how you're dancing. If you're enjoying and expressing yourself genuinely and authentically, that's where people seem to really vibe. And that's where Carnival really gets its off-the-chain reputation from, because you can do pretty much whatever you want when you're there. At the Blocos, you can stand back and watch, you can play in a band, you can dance in the street like no one's watching, and even when they are watching, no one's judging. You'll see everything from elaborate costumes to movie characters, to wild erotic self-expression, to simple silly outfits. It's all welcome, it's all part of it. If you meet someone and there's a spark, people just go ahead and kiss. It's that kind of atmosphere. It's uninhibited, it's playful, and it's high energy. It's debauchery, but it's shame-free and guilt-free and wildly self-expressive. Whenever I went out to any of the blocos while I was there, I would always carry with me what's called a burner phone. That is basically an old phone that I barely use anymore. I carried that instead of my main phone. Because look, when people are out in the streets dancing, drinking, and caught up in the moment, they let their guard down, and would-be criminals know that that's the perfect moment to strike. So I followed the advice which I'd been given, and that is basically don't take anything out that you would not be prepared to lose. So I kept a cross-body bag with me with just a bit of cash, enough to buy some drinks and get the metro fare, and my burner phone, so that if that got stolen I wouldn't lose my photos and it wouldn't be sort of an expensive piece of technology that I would need to replace. Later that night, Will and I were heading back to his hostel because he wanted to change. And on the way back, I had my crossbody bag sort of across here and then the main part of it under my arm. And we walked past a bunch of guys, and one of them sort of stepped forward and went to grab the bag. But as I sort of took the next step, his grip slipped, and he didn't get it in the end. Everyone around him laughed, and it felt like I wasn't sure. Were they laughing because he was trying to scare me, or were they laughing because he had tried to steal from me and failed? Either way, It didn't bother me that much because, again, I only had in that bag what I was prepared to lose, and I had my phone in my left pocket with my hand firmly on it. But it just, it goes to show you that that kind of thing can happen. While I was in Rio, I met 4 different people who had had their phones stolen in 3 different ways. Ironically, they were all Australian guys. The first guy that I met, he had his phone on him and put it in his back pocket, which is sometimes referred to as the pickpocket's friend, so don't do that. And he joined a street party, and while he was dancing, someone had managed to get it out of his back pocket. 2 other guys had ordered an Uber, and as the Uber approached, they walked towards the street holding their phone sort of out like this. And before the Uber even arrived, someone came past on a motorbike and snatched it from their hands. And the last guy had his phone stolen at gunpoint. He was stumbling home from a party through a park, having had a couple of drinks, and it was 4 o'clock in the morning and he was on his own. And someone approached him and forced him to hand over the phone. So unfortunately, I have to say that Rio de Janeiro is probably the place in Latin America that I felt the least secure. What I'm about to say, I don't want to downplay the very real problems of poverty and crime that really blight the city of Rio de Janeiro. But at the same time, millions of tourists visit Rio de Janeiro each year, and most of them leave with nothing but positive stories to tell. I did get the sense that there was, maybe a very small chance that something could go very seriously wrong for me or anyone while traveling in Rio de Janeiro. But I felt that much more likely was the chance that something minor could happen, such as having my phone snatched out of my hand. And those sorts of risks, I really felt that they could be managed by taking some simple precautions. So overall, be smart, be aware, keep your eyes open, take some simple defensive precautions, and you'll probably be fine. The next morning, I woke up and headed to an area just below Sugarloaf mountain known as Urca. It sits on a small beach tucked between the headland at the end of Leme and the Botafogo side. It's a really beautiful, compact little pocket of the city. I was heading there for a specific reason, and that was to meet Jesus. He was my friend of a friend who I had met in Mexico City, and he was actually the person that I had my very first meal in Latin America with all those months ago. By pure coincidence, he had planned a trip to Rio de Janeiro for Carnaval. Jesus and his awesome group of friends were taking part in a French or Parisian themed Blocos. Even though the music was sort of classic Brazilian carnival music with a French theme, the costume theme was absolutely French, and a lot of people really committed to it. Now, I didn't dress for the theme of the Bloco, and that's totally fine. Some people put huge amounts of effort into their Carnival costumes. They plan for months, coordinate with friends, and design outfits specifically for certain themed Blocos. There are even shops all over Brazil that sell themed Carnival gear to support exactly that. But a lot of tourists, myself included, go for a more practical approach, and that is shorts, a t-shirt, something that's comfortable to dance in and walk in, maybe a bit of face or body paint or glitter, and you're good to go. That's really the beauty of Blocos and Carnival generally. You can just turn up there however you feel comfortable, and as long as you've got the right energy and the right vibe, no one really cares. It's just fun. That French Bloco kicked off from Urca just after another one finished, the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band Bloco, which of course is Beatles themed. Themes are a really big thing here, and Bloco themes run the gamut from Japanese manga through to different singers and artists, cultures, different countries, subcultures, movies, bands, cartoons, particular colors. There was even a neurodivergent Bloco going on while I was there that I didn't get to see. The French themed Bloco headed towards Urca Beach, and that was where I said goodbye to Jesus and his friends. You guys were legends, and I really hope that we cross paths again somewhere soon, hopefully at another Carnival. From there, I headed towards Centro to meet another friend of mine, Gabby, who was there with all of her friends, and they were all dressed up in, I'm still not quite sure, whatever it was. You guys looked amazing. Together, we headed to another Bloco just sort of north and west of the center, and that was sort of themed around 70s and 80s disco and rock music and queer culture. I mean, that was so much fun. We were just running around the streets us singing the words to all the songs that we knew. The unofficial drink of Carnaval is the caipirinha, which is basically a cocktail made of cachaça, which is a Brazilian kind of rum or spirit, which is distilled from sugarcane, and it's mixed with sugar and lime. So it's kind of a very refreshing, almost like a sweet mojito, but without the mint in it. That night I didn't party too hard, but the next morning I was up at 5:30 a.m. to head to Centro once again to catch Ludmilla, who is a Brazilian superstar who was running a concert on top of a truck which ran down the center of the city from about 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. It was incredible, and I ran into Will there again, and we spent the rest of the day just exploring the streets of the center. We walked to the famous Escadaria Celeron, which has been the setting for many music video shoots over the years, and it shows because it was full of people all waiting to get their shot there. I eventually got mine. From there, we descended into the area known as Lapa and the Praça Cardeal Camara, where the street parties were really in full swing. Later that evening, Will and I headed down towards Copacabana beach and met some other friends, and we sat there on the beach just chatting about astrology. Will's an astrologer and he's very good at what he does actually. If you're interested, this is his Instagram handle here, and I've also included that in the video description below. We sat there on the beach, listening to the waves coming in, having a couple of drinks, looking at the stars, talking about astrology, and then the whole bunch of us just dancing on the beach until the sun rose, and then we had a street side breakfast before hitting the sack. The next day was Tuesday, and that was the day before the official end of the Carnaval and the final performance at the Sambadrome, which is what a lot of people think about when they think of Rio's Carnival. The Sambadrome is where every year during Carnival, the various Samba schools, Samba being the one of the dances of Brazil, probably the foremost. I'm hesitant to call it a national dance because there are several different dances in Brazil, but it's probably the most iconic one. And that is where all of the Samba schools of Rio de Janeiro put on their parade every year and are judged according to their floats, costumes, and dances. This is what a lot of people don't understand about Carnival, is that there's sort of two big scenes in it. One is like the, disciplined dance steps, the feathers, the costumes, the parade. That's the Sambadrome and the Samba School's performances. But that off-the-chain 24-hour street party energy, that's all happening in the Blocos. I hadn't actually expected to get into the Sambadrome. I thought that I'd left it too late to buy tickets, and I was having such a good time at the Blocos anyway that it didn't really bother me. I'd kind of made my peace with that. But Will managed to get tickets, so thanks to you, Will, if you're watching. My advice to you would be that if you do want to go to the Sambadrome, Try to get the tickets earlier if possible, and maybe contact your accommodation in Rio de Janeiro earlier if possible, obviously once you've booked the accommodation, because they will be able to guide you about how and where to buy tickets. Prices for international websites are often inflated. There are lots of different ticketing tiers and ticket groups and classes, and fake websites abound as well. So get in early and do it with the assistance of a local, preferably. Each evening of the Sambadrome begins at about 10 p.m. and there are 4 Samba schools that pass through, each one taking about 1 hour and 15 minutes to do the length of the Sambadrome. And then there's about a 20 or 30 minute break between each one. So as you can imagine, it starts at 10 p.m. and it ends up going like way into the earlier hours of the morning. Each float and performance represents sometimes a year or more of work. And as they make their way down the Sambadrome, you really get a sense of the scale and dedication involved. The most expensive tickets are in the middle, so you can see all the way down the avenue. But we had some of the cheaper tickets, which were on concrete bleachers at the very end. I'd heard that sometimes the energy of each float or each group as it comes through, it sort of dies towards the end of their sequence, but I didn't see that. I thought it was great. The energy was incredible. We were surrounded by people who love dance, music, culture, costumes, and we were at the party of the year. And the people who were around us, they were cheering on for their Samba schools, their preferred Samba school, the way that certain, football fanatics would cheer on for their football team. The talent, the displays, the elaborate costumes, the floats, the themes, it was just mind-blowing. The first Samba school that we saw was Mocidade, that had a space-age, futuristic kind of theme, which was visually striking. The next school was Tuiuti, and their theme was celebrating Chica Manicongo, considered to be the first known transgender woman in Brazil. Then came what many people considered to be the most spectacular performance of that night, and that was Rio Grande. This one's theme was based around the northern state of Pará, of which Belém is the capital. Being home to both the Amazon and the Atlantic coast, the floats reflected an aquatic theme while also touching on Afro-Brazilian and indigenous culture. This was probably my favorite one of the night. Finally, there was Portela, which we weren't sure that we would stay for since it was now around 4 a.m. But we did, and it was pretty good. Their theme combined mythical creatures and the sun with a drone display, and it also paid tribute to Milton Nascimento, a legendary performer with a long history at Carnaval. In fact, he was atop one of the floats. The following day, the winners were announced, and the winner was a samba school called Beija Flor that had paraded on an earlier day, but in second place was Rio Grande that we had seen the night before. All of this, and then one morning I woke up and it was time to leave Rio de Janeiro. I felt like I had just woken from some kind of fever dream. It was psychedelic, beautiful, fun, free, and joyful. I've never experienced anything quite like that, and I'm not sure that I ever will again. I would do Carnival again, but I don't know that the second time round if it would sort of hold quite the same magic and wonder and awe that the first time did. If I had my time over, I think I'd do Carnival a little bit differently, and I know that Will said the same thing. I think that next time I'd try and strike a balance between seeing what I wanted to and just sort of going with the flow. And that's sort of a balance that really only I began to understand by about day 4. I think with the benefit of hindsight, if I was to do it again, I would probably look up the Blocos that I really wanted to go to and maybe choose 1 or 2 and try and be in place for when they start. If there's like a theme that really spoke to me, for example. However, now I'm going to give you some contradictory advice, and this is something that I heard on an Instagram account that have a WhatsApp group and run tours or experiences in Rio during Carnival. The Instagram account is called Hidden Rio. I've mentioned it on the screen right now and in the video description below. They seem excellent. I haven't used them, but they do seem to really know what they're doing. And they said something recently that really stuck with me, and that is that you don't choose the Blocko, but the Blocko chooses you. So many outsiders make the mistake of thinking, I have to get to this Blocko, or I have to be at this place at this time. They jump on the metro, they try and get through the crowds and the traffic, and they get stuck. And eventually when they get there, the Blocko has moved on or it's finished, and they get disappointed. So they spend the whole 6 days basically like chasing things that they can't quite grasp. And instead, what you're much better to do is just sort of go with the flow. If you hear that something is happening in one place and a group of people are heading there, then you go with them. But you don't sort of like run at different things just because something's supposed to be happening at a certain moment. Carnival's much more fluid than that. If a Blocko is happening at 6 o'clock in the morning and your friends are headed there, that's where you want to be. It's not a thing of like, oh no, I really want to go to this Blocko later. No, it's not about which Blocko you want to go to. It's about that where your friends are going or where you have an opportunity to sort of be there and have fun, that will be fun for you. So my advice to you, if the themes of certain Blockos, and obviously the Sambadrome you have to plan because that requires a ticket, but if the themes of certain Blockos really speak to you, maybe choose 1 or 2 and get there super early and make sure that you are there for that experience. But otherwise, go with the flow, let the city and the energy decide for you, and let that be your energy, and you'll have an amazing time, just as I did. I would love to go back to Rio de Janeiro one day, and maybe I need to go for a month before Carnival because I'd love to do Carnival again, but I'd also like to spend maybe another week or 2 getting to know the city because I felt like that's what I really missed this time. I'm so thankful to everything and everyone in my life up until that point that had brought me to being in Rio de Janeiro during Carnival. I'm so grateful to how that unfolded for me, and the wonderful people that I met and spent it with, Will, Jesus, Gabby, anyone else that I met and haven't mentioned here. You were all part of that experience, and it was like being on another planet for that period. I said this about Salvador. I was like, being in Salvador was like being on planet Salvador, and being in Rio for Carnival, it was like being on planet Carnival for that week. I mean, how do you come down from a high like that? I remember sitting at the airport in Rio de Janeiro waiting for my flight out and just thinking, no words, no words. Thank you, Rio de Janeiro, and thank you, Brazil. And thank you all for watching and being part of this very special experience. I'm so glad that I got to share it with you. Next week, I will be picking up my itinerary again from where I left off in Sao Paulo, and that will be next week in Latin America Diaries. See you then.